recording. And sure. I record the video, but I haven't quite, figured out what to do with the video yet. And
You have it on your website though, don't you?
I don't have my podcasts on the website.
Oh, okay.
I have one from my season 2 intro that
Okay.
I put on my website, but I didn't do that with any of my other episodes yet. And I think what I plan on doing is taking the video and doing kind of 1 minute, like 1 minute clips instead of the entire interview, because I still want people to actually go and listen to it and download it over on the podcast platforms. So I may do little clips, and also just and your husband's on YouTube. I'm sure you guys know it. You don't want people to like watch 2 minutes and then drop out. And so you want them
but I will tell you though, there's people, I know he's not your audience, like my husband, that would rather watch than listen. He can't just listen to something where I can't stand to just watch something for an hour. He will sit and watch a podcast for an hour and a half.
Interesting. Okay, so good to know.
I put mine on YouTube just because, but I only have like, some of them I have like 60 views. Some of them I have like 5. But then I embed both the download link to Libsyn and the video on my website. Okay. So then I just do a little like 1 paragraph intro and then those 2, because I'm like, well, I guess there are people like that. It's not me, but that doesn't mean others. So I'm like, and it just helps your search engine if your name's out there more. So even if nobody's watching it on YouTube, it's an easy way to embed it to your website.
Oh, okay. Okay. Good to know.
For what that's worth.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Awesome.
I'm, like I said, I'm not a perfect at it, but why not? It doesn't cost anything.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. So, So we'll give it a brief pause and I'll introduce you again and we'll just jump in.
Great.
I'm so excited to have Stacy Mayo-Martinez on with me today. Thank you for being on and welcome.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So we connected and I was really fascinated with the kind of work that you do and being in agriculture. We discussed previous to you being on. So I'm going to start again. Sorry.
That's okay.
We talked about how there just aren't a lot of women in agriculture. And of course, with this podcast being focused on women in male-dominated fields, I was like, this is a really interesting gal to have on. So I wanted to have you on and learn more about just your path and your experiences within your field and just get to know you a little bit. So
yeah, well, it is very unique. First of all, only 2% of the U.S. population is involved in actual production agriculture, which is not very many. And so as an industry, we've become a super efficient industry. We're very good at producing food, but it's very interesting because women's role in what we consider farmers and ranchers maybe is not the person always putting the seed in the ground for any crop or maybe the one taking care of the animals. That's not what people think. And so I was raised on a farm. I grew up with livestock, with cattle, caring for crops and caring for animals. And it was an industry I always had passion in. I didn't realize at the time that it was not something women were supposed to go into, or that I was a bit of an anomaly. I grew up in a town that was about 35,000 people. So a pretty small town, but we were a very diverse population. So kind of had a unique upbringing. And I also have 2 older sisters. So I'm the youngest of 3. And when you're only girls on the farm, there's no boy chores and girl chores. There's just chores. And so again, I didn't really know that I was ever not supposed to do something. So I appreciate that. Except it wasn't until probably about halfway into my career, I kind of started realizing that I was in a unique situation. And so I was fortunate. My degree is in agriculture communications. So it's very similar to any general communications and journalism degree, but I just got it through the College of Ag. So my extra studies were all in different segments of the agriculture industry. And my first couple of jobs while my day to day, I was not the only woman in the room. The people I was working for were all men. And so when you're in marketing, that's if you're going to have a group of women in ag, it's in marketing. That seems to be where we congregate the most. But the guys that I was working with every day, the salespeople, my products managers, all of those folks for these big Fortune 500 companies were men.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were many times where I had to understand and position myself that I didn't know everything they knew, because that wasn't my job, right? I'm supposed to be helping them market, but I don't have to know all of the logistics of growing the crop. But I needed to know enough to position them in the right way. So just throughout my career, I've learned and evolved and bobbed and weaved. And there's definitely many times where I will say it's a much shorter line at the bathroom on the women's side for pretty much any conference I go to. And it's a unique situation. But at the same time, there's women, and I can get this too, that are the farmers, are the ones that are actually, harvesting the crops in this fall, and the ones that are planting the crops and doing that every day. And in our industry, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's something that agriculture has done. And I've seen this in other industries too. And so I don't know how it is in medicine, but we've also created women only conferences. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a good and a bad to that. Because we want to be surrounded by other women, right? We find a community there, but at the same time, we still want to be able to go to any conference and feel like we're also welcome. Absolutely. So my past job before I branched out on my own, I was working in the association world. And I was very passionate about trying to put out the idea that a farmer, first of all, is not just the person planting the crop. It's the person that runs any part of the farm. Farm is a business. And so I think that's really important, and a different way of thinking than what the industry does. We've got a long way to go, but it's something I'm pretty passionate about, is helping enable and empower women to feel like they can be the only woman in the room, if that's where we have to go for a couple of 10, 15 years still.
Right. A lot of the things you say really resonate with me too, being in orthopedic surgery. There are a lot of similarities for a long time, and still now we go to conferences as women and the women's bathroom line is nil, which is awesome, but clearly that needs to change. And so I think a lot of us women in orthopedics say, it's our goal to make that line longer. It's detrimental.
Yes. We will take the pain of having to wait in line if it means there's more women in the room.
Exactly. So I want to go back a little bit, and you did tell us a little bit about your childhood, but what town did you grow up in?
Yeah, so it's a town called Garden City, Kansas. And at one point, the county was one of 11 counties in the country that had no majority race. And so it's 60 miles from Oklahoma and 60 miles from Colorado. So it's in the middle of nowhere. My husband grew up in South America. And the first time I took him home, we were living in Wisconsin at the time. It was dark. So he didn't really know what we were literally driving into. And he woke up the next morning and he's like, "Where did you take me?" Because it's so flat, you can see for 40 miles. Wow. Which is, it's not like anywhere else. And I didn't love it growing up, because I just thought I needed trees and hills and those things that other people had that I didn't. But it definitely has a unique aspect and character of its own now. And I just live about 4.5 hours northeast of there, on the opposite corner of the state now, but my parents are still there. And I think because I grew up with so many people that didn't look like me, whether they were male or female or of a different race, that probably helped my ability to realize it's okay to not look like the other people in the room. From a very young age.
Right. And tell me a little bit about your college experience, and tell me about, as a young adult, who your role models were.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I'm the youngest of three girls, and I fought real hard to not be in my sister's footsteps. But we are all three in communications, so that didn't work out very well. But when I went to college, I was the ultimate college ambassador because I majored in about everything. If you ask my mom, I majored in college rather than in something in college. So, but I started out, I thought I wanted to be an education, and I tried that. I went over and did a couple of other more scientific majors. I realized there's a reason I'm not a scientist today, and eventually I ended up in communications. And when I walked into my advisor's office, she's like, "Are you finally ready to admit this?" Because she was my older sister's advisor too, my middle sister, and so who's just 2 years ahead of me. And but she actually was probably, I called her my life coach. She didn't realize that this was a lifetime appointment when you became my advisor, but she is definitely somebody that influenced me. She's a very strong woman that always fought for herself. And she was actually one of the first people that our course that we graduated with, our capstone, we did a great project and it's really helped me in my career. But one of the big things she taught us was negotiating. She taught us how to value ourselves and how to understand. She taught us about benefits, because I think so many people go into the job and they don't really understand, especially many of us with parents that were farmers or were entrepreneurs. And so they didn't have benefits, right? Profit sharing is whether or not you make your business work. Right. And so to not understand that is really easy to do when you graduate college. So that's something that I really appreciated. Her approach to that is really helping us be prepared for what's actually out there. And she was a major influence on me. And like I said, continues to be a very good friend of mine. And I think from there, I graduated and I had two assistant deans, the associate dean and the dean at my graduation party. And so my mom either said they were really ready for me to go, or I like to think it's because I live each of the phases of my life to get the absolute most out of it. And I wanted to get those connections. And I still stay in touch with those people today. And one woman and three men. But I think almost as much when we talk about being a woman in some of these male-dominated industries, you also have to find the men that are willing to prop women up and be our advocates, because they're in the conversations we're not, right? So we need those folks to see the value in us and to find them as well. And so I was fortunate in college to have both men and women that I still stay in touch with today and have as mentors for life.
And after your education and when you entered the working world, tell me a little bit about that path and your experiences. And did you find great mentors along the way as well, both men and women?
Yeah, I did. I was very fortunate, but I also think it was intentional. I knew that was something I needed. So again, I have two sisters that work in the same industry, and I can tell you we have strategic planning conversations at family holidays that is probably not normal. But the great thing is we've made very purposeful paths for ourselves that we never work in competitive industries. So I also appreciate that I have two sisters that have both been there. At their personalities, they will tell you it depends on what answer I want, which sister I call. Do I want the sister that's going to cut it to me straight and pretty much tell me do it or move on? Or do I want the sister that's going to talk it all through and make me feel better about the situation? So there's three, two other personalities, and that's helpful. But when I went into my career, my first manager was a woman that actually also worked remote. And that was definitely in a time pre-COVID that was not normal. And so I had to learn, one, to be a better communicator, because I couldn't just see that person and stop in and ask that question. And it helped me prioritize how I did my work and how I reached out to people. But the other thing that she helped me do, and I actually, on my podcast, I'm going to have her as a guest. So I'm so excited because I also still stay in touch with her. And one of the lessons that she taught me, though, was she said that my generation, she said, your generation thinks you need to be vice presidents from the beginning. And I'm here to tell you, you got a lot of shit to wade through. So pull up your boots and we got some work to do. But she also taught me she would never ask me to do something that she wouldn't do herself. And so when I think about it and reflect on her, she is a woman that's 20 plus years my senior, and she's gone through this industry with a lot less women around her, right? And so she's a little more hardened than I am, and she would probably explain that to herself, but she's been through it. And I appreciate her and the path that she helped set me on of do all the hard work, do the stuff other people don't want to do so they see you're willing to do it. Sometimes that literally means getting dirty, and that's okay. Be the one that's willing to do that. But the other thing that she taught me that I think is so important, especially if you don't feel when you're trying to find those mentors, is to go outside of your specialty. So at that time, I was working for a marketing agency and I worked in public relations, and there was about 5 different sectors within, and you wouldn't think they're that far-fetched, but in public relations, we get stuff for free. So that's our job, to get earned media. The people that we probably worked the least with were the media people that paid for their stuff, right? So they don't always see our value. We didn't always see their value because we didn't go about things the same. But there was a woman that was the media director at my the first place I worked out of college, that she had been there literally since the start of the organization. So 35 plus years. And she was the person that our media reps, pretty much she was their like trainer. She'd go, they would go to her and they'd get hardened up real quick because she was always the boss in the room. She knew her stuff. But I went to her and I said, thanks to my boss, and I was like, hey, I don't understand your world, but I want to. Teach me. Tell me how you do things. How do I learn better about what you do so I can think about that when I'm looking at what I do? And because of that, I actually got the opportunity at one point to do a little media buying. And that was not normal. But I went and I admitted, I don't know. I want to learn from you. You have skills I don't. And how can we work this out? And she's since retired, but I continue to stay in touch with her. And so sometimes I think it's finding those mentors that don't do the same thing as you.
Right. I think
And
that's
finding
really
those,
wise.
yeah, find those people that literally know things that you don't, and don't be intimidated by that. Just be a sponge and take it all in, and they're going to appreciate you because you don't have to. It's not your job, right, to go talk to them, but it's a really good way to do that.
Tell me about some of the biggest challenges you encountered.
I actually was talking to a friend last night about the fact that I think, unfortunately, there's still 2 types of women in the workforce. The ones that are ready to do anything to give you a hand up. They'll put their knee out. They're going to help push you. They're going to pull you along. They want to do everything they can to enable you. And then there's women that feel like there can only be one person at the top.
Yeah.
And I think that's my biggest struggle, is a couple of people that I thought would be that person to give me a hand and to help me grow. And instead they were the person that were intimidated. And this is male or female, but I see this with when they see there's not many women at the top, they think there's only room for one.
Right.
And especially the hardest part with that is just really seeing, and maybe this is just my opinion or my experience, but I would think this would be the same way in medicine. You don't all have to know everything.
It's true.
Right?
Absolutely.
As you get further in your career, you specialize. And if you get intimidated by somebody that knows something that you don't, you can't know as much as them because they don't know as much as you, right? There's only so much space.
Right.
You're more scientific. I'm a words person, but I can only think. We have only so much mental capacity. And so there's the idea of bosses that of any type, or managers that get intimidated when their team knows things that they don't. I think that is a huge detriment to growth within the organization.
Right. I think it ends up being a leadership weakness. You can't put that part of the ego aside. And so, I could see how your approach to the woman that was outside of your area, and going to her and saying, hey, I don't know this, I want to learn from you. It kind of depends who who you go to. She ended
Oh
up
yeah.
being somebody who, taught you, took you under her wing, became a de facto mentor.
Mm-hmm.
But it easily could have been one of the women who say, you know what, there's just not enough room for the both of us. And
Yeah.
so sometimes it's hard to know if that person's going to be open to taking you under their wing.
Yeah. And you just have to, you can't take it personal, even if it's meant to be personal. Just let it go, ask and feel it out. And if it doesn't jive, don't push it for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you can go, maybe outside of your company. And if
Mm-hmm.
you have a good friend or, a former colleague and say, hey, do you know anybody that knows something about X? I really
Right.
want to learn about it, but I'm not sure where to start.
Right.
And yeah, but it's definitely hard to kind of break up with those people that you've idolized, that you're like, that's the person, I'm going to learn from them, I'm going to follow them, I want to emulate them. And then when you meet them or you try and work with them, they just
It's
aren't
a
that person.
disappointment.
Yes. Yes. And that's where I think you just have to decide that's on them and not on you. And I'm
Yeah,
not good at that. I
absolutely.
can say that, but it's hard. It's emotional about it. So yeah.
Yeah. And on that note, sometimes we run into obstacles, we run into no's, and it's very disappointing at the time, and it kind of beats up your own ego. But in retrospect, and I've found this in my own experience, in retrospect, I look back and I say, you know what, that was like the best no I've ever received. It put me on a different path. What was the best no that you have ever received?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think I recently made the transition to working as my own boss, and my
Hmm.
husband and I started our own business. And I think with that, I had to learn, and it was not a direct no, but it was an indirect no. And I think those are sometimes even more difficult, right? When you're
Yeah,
being realistic with what you're actually being told versus what you're hearing.
right.
And it was, we were in a place where I had to make the jump because I no longer aligned
Mm,
with where the leadership was, and my passion and my drive and my energy was just not being utilized. And that was really, really hard for me because I poured my heart and soul into something for, 4.5 years. And then to walk away, to see that I didn't feel appreciated in the same way that I felt previously, and that it was just lost. And what I at the time felt like was immediate, looking back, it wasn't. That's kind of where I said those unspoken no's.
hmm.
But now here I am, and I'm figuring it out, and I'm doing what I'm passionate about, and I'm getting to decide where my time is spent. And this is the first time I've been able to do that in my career. And I don't I don't regret anything I've done. And who knows if I'll continue to do this forever, but I do appreciate that every time I've made a change, you can't see it immediately. But
Hmm.
even 6 to 12 months looking back, you can say, that was right. This was
Yeah.
something was driving me to do something else. But it is that's probably the biggest no that has impacted me to find the next window.
So I have been this whole time as you're talking, I'm like, I cannot wait to hear more about your new gig and your business that you launched. So tell me the name of your business. Tell me a little bit more about what it is you do and what your day to day is like now.
Yeah, and I should have asked you this before. Do you want me to talk about my free course that I have if people are interested or not?
You totally can.
Okay, I
Yeah.
didn't want to I didn't want to jump in there if that wasn't a good fit for
Yeah,
you.
no,
So
it's fine.
okay. So a couple months ago, mid-year, because why not? It's a pandemic. It's 2020. Crazy things are happening. My husband had already left his full-time position. He is a photographer, videographer, and he was actually part-time at a university and decided to go out on his own. And about a month later, I decided to join him. And so it wasn't really planned, but then the stars aligned and we just decided to go for it. And because of that, I'm still continuing to work in the ag industry, which I'm so passionate about, helping farmers tell their story and helping producers understand and be confident in the food supply that we provide. But I also am getting to branch out and work with other industries, hopefully construction. Again, nothing like entering into those industries that are pretty male dominated.
Absolutely.
Not much intimidates me these days, I guess, and really helping people tell their story. That's what I'm passionate about. And so I'm hoping to continue to do that. And I've been fortunate. As soon as we made the decision, the stars just kind of lined up, and that's when we knew it was the right decision. It's not easy. But it's showing that we can do it. And one thing that I found through my last job was that I'm very passionate about helping others. I always do that, and that's probably why I started in education. But I really want to create an environment that is for personal, professional development. I feel the industries across them, other than the very technical ones, such as medicine, even education, accounting, those ones that you have to do continuing professional development, we don't get actual professional development. We get technical training. Mm-hmm. And I feel pretty passionate about that. I think that's something that for especially those people as individuals, that if they want to do that, I want to help connect them. And so in looking back, I've talked about some of the really awesome people already, but I just also realized I have really amazing people in my life. And I wanted to share those people. And so I started my own podcast as well, called Connect, Change, and Challenge. And that's how we got connected. And it's for both men and women. But it's funny because I predominantly have women on there because that's who I also want to make sure to enable and pull up and give them an opportunity whenever I can. But with that, it's focused on personal professional development. So every episode has a different topic, and I have somebody that's experienced that or that has focused in that area, learned something in that area, whether it's being intentional or pivoting, and we talk about that. So I've done that and then taken my passion one step further and created an online course for the topic I'm most passionate about, and that's personal branding, because I think so many times we don't know who we are as individuals, and that can affect our career and how we move forward. And so that's also something that is going on too. And who knows what the next 30, 60, 90 days will hold, but I know this is something I really care about. And I'm happy to be where I am in the industry I'm at, still getting to help businesses, still working for the farmers that I've built my career around, but also hoping to help individuals across industries and sectors.
That's amazing. Now, did you ever have any feelings of imposter syndrome as you were getting ready to launch your own business and be an entrepreneur? It's a departure from what you've done over the years.
Oh, I have it every day. I had it every day, even before I was in this, doing my own thing. And it's amazing because I think people that meet me all tell you I'm very confident, and I try. I am, but I'm also definitely my harshest critic. And, I was talking, that same friend that I mentioned earlier, she and I were talking, and we were talking about the fact that she does the opposite of me. She goes in and she gets intimidated by the situation and she just won't share anything. And she comes out of the meeting and says, there's all of these things going through my head that I should have said. I, on the other hand, will come out of a meeting and completely critique my performance and think about everything and doubt everything. And I don't know why, because I know what I'm talking about. I'm not 2 years into my career. I'm very confident in my abilities. It doesn't mean I always talk. There's definitely still room to listen and absorb and not be the person. You don't want people to think you're the person in the room that thinks they know it all. And that's what I feel like I am constantly critiquing myself. Did I say too much? Did I was I obnoxious? Was I the only person that asked questions? And so I constantly evaluate myself. And that was, like I said, even before I jumped. But the way every time I feel very intimidated, one, I have a husband that's super supportive, and that's helpful. But I also have a tribe of people that are also entrepreneurs, some that have known me before, some that work with me now. And when I'm like, I call them, especially with what I do, I send estimates out. And people are paid for my time.
Mm-hmm.
That is the most intimidating thing to value.
Mm-hmm.
And so I send that out and I think it's good. I have no idea. I'm immediately like, if they don't respond and what was it too much? What did I do wrong? And so, but it's so important to have your tribe and have your people around you. I don't know that self-reflection is bad. I think some people could use more of it.
Absolutely. I think it's a good thing to have. And I think that's why a lot of successful people have this imposter syndrome, because they are self-reflecting. You kind of question whether you should have done this or should have done that. Or are you good enough? Could you be better? And so I think we need to accept it as part of just the natural process of personal growth and career growth. But to also be able to manage it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And pull your seat up. Be confident. If there's not room for you at the table and you're invited to the meeting, you make room for you at the table. You don't sit in the back of the room.
Right.
Because if you were invited, you're supposed to be there and you're supposed to be valuable. And you're supposed to add value is what I should say. And if the people in the room don't accept that, that's on them. That's not on you.
We have to know our worth.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's super hard. But I also think you need to find, if you're going to meetings where you're intimidated, find a couple people in there that can be your allies. And sometimes that's men and sometimes that's women. But I find I'm a very quick processor. And so we'll be in brainstorm discussions and I'm spouting off ideas. And I can look around the room and I can see there's people that aren't. And I, check myself and throw out a couple of ideas, but then let other people. But then I will also, even if I'm not the one running the room, it's probably really upsets people. But if I can see that somebody is not being called on, but I can see in their face or I know them, I'll just say, hey, Susie, what do you think of this idea? Because why not? What does it hurt? Who are you going to offend? The person in the room that didn't call on them anyway?
Right.
If that's the best idea that comes out of the room, it's worth it.
Absolutely. So now, as an entrepreneur and owner of your own business, like you were saying earlier, you manage your own time. You get to decide where you are and when. And I would think that along with that, there are some challenges with time management and getting what you need to get done when it's supposed to get done. And it definitely takes a lot more self-discipline. Tell me about, I'm curious, what some of your proudest life hacks are to help boost your productivity.
I think it's to admit if you're a morning person or not.
I love that.
And I'm not. And many times my days won't start. My truly working when I'm going don't start until 9. But there are many times at 8:00 at night, I'm working on things. And my husband's a creative. I am a logistical creative, I like to call it, because I'm kind of a crossover, but he will work until 2 a.m. on a project if he's really in the groove and just going. I know I don't do my best work past a certain time, but there's times when I'm sitting on the couch and we're doing something and he and I are still spending quality time together, but I am getting stuff done because it's the right time to get it done. So I think one is be realistic about when you work best. I'm not saying that's every day I don't start at 9, and that'd be glorious, but that's not realistic either. So, but I also have a very short commute and can pretty much wear whatever I want to work. So there's that opportunity too. The other thing I think a little bit of a hack is you don't, especially with what we do, I can't sell my secrets to everybody, right? I don't want to just tell them to everybody because that's what people pay for, is my experience and my intelligence. And so, but I do have 3 people that are in my inner circle that I have to talk things through. And I need to talk it through with someone that has the same mindset as I do. Mm-hmm. And those 3 people are on call for me, just like I'm on call for them. And we can talk it through. And they don't have the exact same skill set as I do. And so there's times where they need, hey, you're more logistic. Does this make sense? Like, am I thinking this the right way? And we just have that shared camaraderie. And it's in, it's in confidence that we talk about things, but I need them. And I think that is also part of going into business with your spouse. When we signed our papers for our LLC, we joked that would be harder to get out of than a marriage, but I don't know that is a joke. It says 50-50. So legally we know how we're bound there.
Right.
But I also don't expect him to be that person for me. That's not, right. It's not how his mind works. He needs to work a different schedule than I do, and that's okay. We need time apart. We need time in different parts of the house, and that's okay. I think that's kind of, just be honest with yourself is hard. It's so hard, but it's so important. And some days you just need a sick day, and you just need to recharge, and that's okay too.
Right. And, and I was actually just going to ask you, as somebody who is working from home and an entrepreneur, self-care ends up being so important. And so what is your number one self-care practice?
So my husband his passion in photography. He does commercial photography and videography, but his personal passion is birds. And so our vacations many times are spent wherever a bird is, wherever we're going. But it's also a good release for us. And it's a good release because I like to read. I'll read ridiculous, stupid, low romance novels that take me 6 hours because I just need a mind break.
Right.
Or I'll read, a branding book, or I'll read a business development book. But so we go to the middle of nowhere, and he gets, what he wants to do and build up that personal passion of his. And I get to release and read and really recharge myself.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll go shoot with him. I love doing photography and videography too. And so sometimes I'll be out there with him, but we also did have to come to the agreement. Sometimes I'm just going to sit in the car, and maybe I'm taking a nap. Maybe I'm reading a book, but I'm just not in my house, in my environment, because he has been helpful for me to keep me in check, because I could work constantly. It's just, I don't know if it's the farm girl in me that there was always something to do on the farm, right? There's always chores to do. So you could always do something, but I've learned I have to sit and recharge.
Right.
And I also have learned I have to have time to myself, even without him. And that may be just going to a park and work, even if I'm working, just by myself, just being away. And as an extrovert, that was really hard for me to learn. I didn't understand it until I was valued my time just at home with nothing to do, or valued leaving without seeing laundry or dishes or something to clean or something that I could be doing to really to recharge.
Well, and I think in our world these days, we're relying so much on the digital world and digital connection, especially in the midst of a pandemic, that it becomes ever more important to find opportunities to just unplug. And I think it just does so much for our soul to be able to do that. And I speak from personal experience because I am so addicted to my iPhone that, I really have to enforce it with myself to just put it down and go open a book, an actual book made of paper. So that's so valuable. Well, I always like to make sure that we get a really good, at least one really good nugget of advice from you for women pursuing careers in male-dominated fields. So what is your number one piece of advice?
And I instead of being intimidated by being the only one or one of few women in the room, be excited that you are paving the way for someone else in the future. You are taking a step, and the work that you are doing today truly will impact women in the future. And in your confidence, your knowledge, it won't always seem like it's making progress now. But someday the Nobel Peace Prize for genetics and the work that's being done are going to go to women, and it's not going to be an anomaly.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to celebrate the fact that it's women that won it, and instead we're just going to celebrate two amazing scientists that won it. We're not there, but just remember those people and how far those that before you, what they had to go through. Be confident in your abilities. Don't lose your self-evaluation, because it is key, but everyone else doesn't have to know about your your concerns. Be confident in yourself and have your concerns after you leave the room.
I love that advice. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like life is so short, and at the end of the day, you want to look back at your achievements and the things that you've done and realize that you are leaving a legacy. And so I think that's really a really good guiding principle. So where can our listeners find you if they want to find you online or listen to your podcast, or maybe look up Mayonnaise Marketing and obtain your services? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can either look up Mayonnaise, and so that's the combo of the Mayo and Martinez in my name. So fun story, I really hate mayonnaise, but we thought that was a fun combo that came up at our wedding, actually. So either Mayonnaise Marketing, just Mayonez Marketing, or you can look up my podcast is Connect, Change, and Challenge, and that's what each of the episodes has. And so those come out weekly, and again are just really cool people from across the country. And I'm season 2 as going to have a couple of global clients as well. So I'm excited to have you on my podcast, and we're going to do some exchanges and continue the conversation, because I want as many women out there to be confident in their abilities and to be making strides for all of us as we can.
Well, it was a pleasure having you on, Stacy. Thank you so much for all of that knowledge that you dropped for our listeners. I think it's going to be helpful for so many listeners. Thanks again.
Well, yeah, and thank you for just enabling this discussion, because it's not one that we all have in secret, but it's out there, it's public, and hopefully there's men listening to understand how they can also support the women in their industry.
Thanks again.
Thanks.